Gillette, Penn and Teller. Big guy does magic, smaller guy next to me, he does magic too. He doesn't talk that much. Anyway, I wanted to welcome you to In Time. Welcome you all to In Time with Nick. Love you all. Peace. Go get him, Nick.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. No, hell has not frozen over. We did start on time. In the couple of years that I've been doing this, this is probably the second or third one. So, thank you all for joining us. My guest tonight, Digital Gnosis, and we're going to be speaking with him about his deconversion, because it gets he's been thinking things over, so I think it's going to be an interesting conversation, especially in light of Marianne coming to talk to us about Christian atheism. He actually, on his channel, had a discussion about Christian atheism yesterday, so I'd like to discuss that with him a little bit. Meanwhile, we also have, later tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have Floyd FP back for another discussion on the book of Daniel. He's going to be covering the 70 weeks prophecy and what it says, the different ways of interpreting it, and how and why Christians use it as a defense that Jesus was in fact the Messiah and was predicted to within a year or two, depending, by the Old Testament. So that's going to be tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. I hope you will join us for that. We also are going to have on this Friday, we're going to have the next episode of Off Time. It's going to be Xandering and I talking a bit more about gun control and the values of conservatives versus liberals in the United States. So that'll be Off Time. It's going to be a short episode, but that will be on Friday. And also on Friday, we're going to be doing another After Dark call-in show. I hope you guys will join us. Maybe call in for that. And then next week, we're going to have Dr. Josh on the Christian apologetics. That will be on July 15th. He's going to be covering arguments that Christians, the Old Testament isn't even their book, but of course they do need to defend it to some extent. That is their God. And that book is, of course, the foundation for Jesus and the New Testament. So we're going to be discussing Christian apologetics with Dr. Josh. That will be a week from Thursday. So all that done. I hope you guys will definitely give this stream a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. It helps us in the algorithm. It's a great way to help. The other way to help, of course, is you can become a patron. The link that is down in the description. And we're going to be having this month's patron hangout. I think next week. I think we're looking at next Monday. Normally we have it the first Monday of every month, but because of the 4th of July, an American holiday, we did have to push it back, so I apologize to all of our patrons for that. And I also apologize for the dog going cray-cray. There's construction outside, and he's getting a little triggered. So, at any rate, having said all that, today's guest is Nathan Ormond, and he also goes by Digital Gnosis. He has a YouTube channel on which he discusses a number of topics, including philosophy, deconversion, religion. You can see why we wanted to have him on. And has engaged in other projects. He's got a website, a few other things that we're going to discuss with him. So without any further ado, let's bring out Nathan Ormond. Nathan, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on. And also, I didn't realize you had endorsement from Penn Jillette at the start. That was pretty cool.
Well, thank you. Well, it's a cameo. You know, you can get them for just
Right.
about. You know, so we've got a couple that we drop in every now and then on the thing. Probably should save them for the after show, but I don't know. I was feeling. Thank Amy Newman for the idea. Feeling. I don't know. I was a little more say playful than usual. I guess I'm gonna drop it into the show. So how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. A little bit lightheaded and woozy today. So I don't know how sharp I'll be in terms of answering like in-depth questions or anything like that. But yeah, pretty good. Finished work. So
Perfect. The foggier
happy
you are, the
to-
better I look.
Yeah.
So I just,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
There we go.
we'll have Titan drop his question, his philosophy question, in the live chat, and we'll see if you can answer that.
Yeah. It's like 15 premises, and like all in symbolic logic or something.
Oh no, it's worse. But at any rate, so the so tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Tell us about your YouTube channel and in general. We've got a link to your channel down at the bottom. So, what is it that you do?
Yeah, so the channel itself is called Digital Gnosis. Gnosis being a Greek word that means knowledge. Some of you who are kind of into religions and early Christianity and stuff might be familiar with a sect called the Gnostics, this kind of notion of undergoing gnosis and getting some special knowledge or something. I don't suppose I'm part of like a privileged group that's undergone some internal knowledge change or something like that. But the idea is that I guess online digital platform, I'm trying to sort of spread knowledge about things that I'm interested about. So various kind of things go on my channel. I've got interviews with philosophers, interviews with mathematicians and scientists, interviews with people who have converted or deconverted from Christianity or other religions as well. I spoke to a few people who were Muslims, for example, about them coming on, and I want to have some Jehovah's Witnesses on and Mormons as well. I mean, James Fodor, who's my co-host, he used to be a Mormon, and we do a lot of stuff together, including a Bad Apologetic series, which is one of the series we've got on there. So we sort of critique how religious apologists overstate the case for their particular religions, how they can abuse philosophy as we see it. So rather than using philosophy as a tool to sort of cultivate careful thinking and to promote exploring kind of ideas and fostering like better thinking about the things maybe we believe or coming to more true beliefs, it's just weaponized and used to beat people over the head with who haven't had the privilege of as much time to read the books and learn the concepts, and then it's just taken out there and weaponized in that way. So we're really against that, and that's what the Bad Apologetics series is about, is saying, is sort of trying to explicate and expound upon how apologists are doing that from a philosophical point of view, and then we also commentate on some of the sociological kind of aspects of apologetics, like the money that's involved, the sort of endless buying of books and promoting of careers out of apologetics and stuff like that. Other things I've got going on the channel, I'm doing a history of logic series if people are into that kind of thing. So the first episode on Aristotelian logic is up, and that's about it. I've also have open conversations, so people are welcome to come and hang out every so often, where I invite criticism and also people who disagree or want to promote different opinions, and we can explore those ideas. And then I guess something else to look forward to aside from the interviews and things is that I'm going to be doing some episodes doing street epistemology, so going out into the real world and having conversations with people about things that they believe. I mean, primarily probably people who are against like vaccinations and stuff like that, but it could be any topic that that people bring up, really. So that should be interesting and fun.
So you do counters to people who would try to weaponize philosophy. So let me ask you a question: how could you do that if God hadn't invented logic?
Yeah,
So I had to.
Well, you got me in my denial of my denial of God logic, which is needed to secure all possibility and impossibility. You've got me. Yeah.
Checkmate, Nate. Thanks for coming. It's been a great show.
Yeah, right. Bye, guys.
So, all right. So, actually, what would like to, we've been talking about getting on a Scientologist and having a discussion like that, and that may be one that might do well to come on in and help us out with it. So that's we'll stay in touch, and then I also wanted to have someone who knows a lot more about the Kalam than I do to come in and have that conversation. So, we'll because it's been going around the atheist communities right now. There's always something. There's pre-supper. Right now, it's the Kalam. Right. So that's what it is. All right. Well, now, I was going to start with sort of where you are today, but let's start with let's start at the beginning. So, what was the religion of the household you were born into, and tell us a little bit about that environment.
Yeah, I actually wasn't really raised with a religion. I'm adopted, so that does play into my story because I think some of the difficulties around being adoption have caused me psychological sort of issues, which have pushed me toward religion as a kind of coping mechanism for dealing with some of those things. But my adoptive parents weren't religious at all. I don't think they really. I don't know, maybe they probably thought about these questions. Well, I mean, when I think about some of the things that my dad said, though, for example, like quotes come to mind from when I was like 12 or something. When you look at a pile of ants and stomp on them, I think that we're kind of like that. Or he's not a big philosophical thinker, and I don't think he's got very well thought through positions on some of these things.
It doesn't seem to like ants, but okay.
Yeah, and doesn't like ants either. No, and I think from the way he was raised and stuff, he's got this sort of, because he was raised with 5 other brothers. I think he's got this idea of sort of might makes right and stuff like that. But not very questioned assumption, not a lot of questioned assumptions, I think. And so it wasn't particularly philosophical. I guess English primary schools are relatively influenced by Christianity. So the primary school I went to, there would be hymns, but I think there was also a mix of kind of secular sort of hymns in there where it's like, isn't it good to share the stuff in your pencil case with the people? Yay, have a good day or something, like those sorts of hymns in the morning, along with the only ones I really remember as being religious was what was it, like Water of Life or something, and Lord of the Dance. I don't know if you're familiar with those in America, but Lord of the Dance is an absolute banger from primary school.
Lord of the Dance was stolen, but yes. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. I don't know about the history of it.
It was a Quaker song written in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and
okay.
The lyrics were lost. It was "Simple Gifts" was the name of it. The lyrics were lost, and then
right.
I don't think it was Flattery himself, but somebody in that general vicinity picked it up. This is a Scottish song now because we've added lyrics to it. But at any rate, and the fact that I live in Boston has nothing to do with why I am slightly triggered by the fact that you misattributed the song. Please continue.
Yes. Well, I didn't know anything about the history behind it, but I guess that maybe some of these hymns, I don't particularly remember having a religious studies education in primary school, but I do remember, one year we talked about the Egyptians, and I guess I remember, the myth of the when you die, your heart being weighed against the feather of eternal truth. I remember that. Not thinking that that's literally true, but that having some sort of, I thought, well, that's a kind of cool idea. And so, yeah, I guess then into high school, I would at that point, I think, have identified more as an atheist. And when I was in high school, that's when a lot of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse were doing their atheism activism type thing, like the big debates and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I think I was quite into Richard Dawkins at the time, and I would have identified and Pothole of 54 on YouTube. I have no idea if he's still around, but I think I quite liked a lot of his stuff that he did, debunking like young Earth creationism, that kind of thing. And so I I don't think I wasn't particularly into philosophy. I don't think I'd had a philosophical education, but my school was really good on the sciences. So I guess I was like, yeah, there's just not really a place for religion in my worldview. I think as I got a bit older, especially towards the end of my teenage years, and struggling more with becoming a person, that's maybe when religion began to appeal to me more, as dealing with some of those issues. And like taking psychedelics, for example, for the first time, I think I was like, well, what the hell was that? And I didn't have a particularly sophisticated, like there weren't any neuroscientists around to sort of explain to me how naturalism could kind of like account for the experiences that I had. I don't even think I would have had the philosophical tools to be like, well, what is naturalism versus this or that? So I think that those things push me more towards a kind of agnosticism slash somethingism, like there's something more, like whatever the hell that was, that's something more. And then I had a bunch of kind of difficulties after that, where I had a few surgeries on my knees. I wasn't able to finish high school in the normal way because I also met my biological mum for the first time, and there were a bunch of difficulties around that. So I ended up being really depressed and struggling with those sorts of things. And I guess as I was recovering through that period, I got into listening to Jordan Peterson's lectures. I think this is around about the time that he first went on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yep. And that's when he exploded. Okay, yep.
Right, yeah. And then I, off of that, I suppose I jumped into listening to him, like videos of him at these protests and things where he's shouting about Bill C-16. And this is as well as I'm forming my first kind of real political views, I guess. I mean, in the UK, we've got certain different political issues going on at the time around, like Brexit and stuff like that. But broadly, I didn't have any really strong opinions. And so I'm just starting to kind of form these views about religion, what life is as an adult, and what politics is. And I guess it seemed like someone like Jordan Peterson was kind of offering a complete package. And then he's saying, well, this all comes part and parcel with the influence of Protestant Christianity. And I became interested in his biblical series lectures. And where did I go after? Oh yeah, I think around that time then I started thinking about going to a Bible study at a local church. And again, ignorant of the sort of issues, the potential kind of pitfalls of that, that these people in this church might have a theology that's really extreme and wrong, or some, which it turned out they were all, Calvinists, right? And then I began adopting some of their views over time, eventually identifying as a sort of, well, I wouldn't have said I'm a fundamentalist, but I think what would be considered a sort of fundamentalist, Calvinist, low church, evangelical type Christian, where, like every weekend I'd be going out and doing some evangelism or something, and we'd be doing like prayer groups in the morning and things like every morning in coffee shops, and even at work, sending like embarrassing emails to absolutely everyone, inviting them to my lunchtime Bible study and stuff like that. Do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah. I want to unpack some of that. Actually, I want to go back almost to the beginning. I want to go back to something you said early on.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think human beings need religion?
Need religion? It depends what you mean by need, I guess.
I was going to write down, that's going to be the next question. Well, and it depends on what I mean by human beings. Do I mean individuals, or do I mean the species as a...
It depends what all the words mean in the question.
It depends what each of those... Yeah, thanks.
Let me go with some of the options I'm thinking of then. I'll tell you what some of the options I'm thinking of.
Please.
I'm thinking, well, needs in one sense could mean sort of like a logical entailment or something. And I don't think there's anything like that. Like if there's a human being, then necessarily it follows that there's like a religious attitude or belief or something like that. Yeah. But I think our best sort of psychology and anthropology and stuff like that tells us that it's a pretty fundamental part of human psychology to do something with narratives, tell us that, like kind of fictionalize a narrative about where we come from, where we're going, what our highest values are and stuff like that. And I guess that's broadly how I would categorize religion. I wouldn't say religion is about the one true God who I believe in, or something like some people would define it that way. I define it more in that sort of anthropological sense of, like looking at humanity is like a scientist from the outside and going, oh, it's this thing they do where they sort of mythologize their narratives and things. And so I think people can live without that, but I sort of think there's just this tendency to do that. And if it's not Christianity, maybe it turns out to be, a myth of Trump as the leader who's making America great again or something. And I'd class that as like a religious, but I mean, it's deeply tied to evangelicalism. So, but yeah.
Well, so you had said that you think it may have been a coping mechanism for you, where you had,
right.
You were trying to deal with the uncertainty of having been adopted. So, first of all, it sounds like at least you needed it. What do you think? Would you have been able to function? What would you have glommed onto something else, or what do you think would have happened if you hadn't have had religion as this tool? And then, what did religion provide for you? What was it that it was giving you at that time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't say with certainty what else might have kind of filled that psychological desire that I kind of had, or that what else might have sort of become a crutch for dealing with those issues, I guess. And I mean, I look at various people online. I don't know if you're aware of like a fitness YouTuber called Elliot Hulse.
I may be. I'm not sure if I know the one you're. I may be.
Yeah, so he's done tons of weird stuff over the years, like breathing into your balls, bioenergetic catharsis, some like pseudo-scientific sort of, and now interestingly, he's quite a fundamentalist evangelical Christian, weirdly enough. But I think I could have taken a lot of weird views. It could have been, it could have been toxic views towards women, like MGTOW or something like that. Gavin McInnes, those kind of views. I think I was certainly vulnerable to people whoever was selling me certainty, kind of in a package. I wasn't sort of thinking things through critically because I just didn't have those tools. That's not to say, I was or wasn't intelligent enough to do that. It's just that I'd never been given those tools to systematically think about things. And so, so maybe even someone like, I listened to Stephen Molyneux for a time, and he's pretty weird with some of his ideas, and even cult-like ideas like defooing, family of origin. If you've got toxic people in your family of origin, get rid of them and listen to free domain radio with Stephen Molyneux or whatever. I think I was looking for sort of father figure type characters in these people. So even Joe Rogan might have filled that for me. And so, listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and before you know it, you're on a keto diet and you're training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think various things could have filled that. It's also possible, I think it's completely possible that a really good counselor could have come along and dealt with these things in a completely different way, maybe that didn't involve anything to do with religion or any kind of weird beliefs at all. There could have been a really healthy way of dealing with it as well. But I think in all likelihood, with the way the kind of internet is and the weird people that I was listening to and the ideas I was exposed to, if it hadn't been Christianity, it would have been something else pretty strange.
So what was the Christianity giving you? You mentioned certainty before. Was that it, or was there what?
Yeah, I think it's this idea that as you start becoming independent and an adult, it's like there's these questions of how am I going to live my life? How do I do life? There's what's a job? What's a career? How do I make a career? What's this office politics thing? How do I live? Do I want a family? What does it mean to have a family? How do I manage it? There's just overwhelming amount of questions. And I think, especially for someone who's already coming into that quite depressed and not with a lot of positive emotion about the future for whatever reason, that overwhelming sense of the way that life isn't a good thing. And so for me, having a framework that was like, well, here's all the answers, was something that was just really comforting. It's like, well, here's the way life is. And by the way, all that uncertainty, you can now classify that in your mind with spiritual warfare. People who are saying that, well, you can rule out, for example, being gay or bisexual as an option because religion tells you that's wrong. So that straight away, there you go. Relationships have become simple. You got to get married and you have kids. And then careers. Well, how about you've got this one job? Maybe you don't like it, but let's not check. You can pick up your cross every day, go to work, and have this little nuclear family. Now, I'm not saying that is the theology of Christianity, but certainly the kind of groups that I was in, it was like, here's a certain answer to some of these questions, and that just helped me,
it's a pretty consistent theme. I mean, I think the grounding for, I mean, the admittedly post hoc, but nonetheless post hoc rationale behind the homophobia that you find not in every Christian sect certainly, but as a main theme in a great many of them. The post hoc rationalization is, well, they can't make kids, and Jesus wants you to be fruitful and multiply. So it's a big enough theme that they can actually, they're pretty serious about it. So
yeah. So I guess it was just this idea that it was answering those questions that was sort of plaguing me, and then further to that, it packaged my life up with this kind of meaning, which is to, spend my free time like evangelizing to people, learning apologetics arguments to go out to convert people. And that just sort of, I don't want to say helped in a way, because I think there were healthier ways of dealing with it. I think I was more healthy after I deconverted, and a lot of people could be more healthy. And there's also a healthy way as well of doing religion, but I was doing it a very unhealthy way. And but that again was a crutch for this sort of emptiness that otherwise would have been filled with, well, I just don't know what the hell I'm doing, sitting on the sofa binging Netflix, whatever, maybe.
You know
or
what
being really unhealthy in the gym all the time, or what? Yeah, sorry, you go ahead.
You know what the problem is with alcohol? It works. It works.
Right.
Didn't work, nobody would drink. Still toxic. Still not a good idea, but it does work.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So, and I want to make something clear to our audience before we continue much further with this. So, I do want to ask you. So, you were literally that guy. You were sending around the office emails, going like, Bible class tonight. So, we've all known somebody like that. So, I want to make it crystal clear that Nate here is not that guy who did it to you. So, it would be inappropriate to go to his channel. And sub while you're there because you're a nice person, and then start to send complaints about what people like this have done to you in the past. It's just grossly inappropriate, and nobody should do that because that would be inappropriate.
It sounds kind of like you're baiting people to do it.
What? Oh my God. I have almost never been this offended by a guest before, certainly not since last Tuesday. Oh, my God. This is what happens when we... Okay, this is the kind of interview it's good. Now I see where this is going.
Now the gloves are coming off.
All right, so yeah, okay, you were doing that. And were you... A lot of people, when they start going through this, they can't have friends that are outside that group, and they can't. So that's sort of... So what was this doing to, your friendships, your sort of your ability to function in society in other ways?
Yeah. I mean, at work I was probably really annoying because every conversation every day would have probably been about the moral argument, right? Every conversation. It's like, do you want to go and get coffee, Nathan? Well, how do you justify objective moral values or something like that? I just wanted to see if you get coffee, dude. Yeah, but why would it be a nice thing to get coffee if God doesn't exist? If you're just mad, that sort of thing. Probably literally that bad. I definitely, I was going through my photos on my phone the other day, and I had, there was on the wall in the cafeteria, it said something like, my personality would be nothing without coffee. And I remember seeing that and thinking, another one of Satan's tricks. You're intrinsically valuable as a human being before God, not this you don't need coffee to be valuable. Yeah. So I was fully in the sort of crazy spiritual warfare and everything camp. in terms of other things, I was pressured. So I was really into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the time as a result of sort of the Joe Rogan ideology, I suppose. But I was pressured to leave doing that because I was doing that 2 times a week and it would interfere with these one-to-ones that I had with a ministry trainee. So he was saying, well, I think this is a bit of an idol you've got, kind of like a golden calf that you're worshiping instead of God. So you need to give that up. So I remember I was teaching the intro classes these 2 times a week, and then have maybe a couple of other times I'd be training for myself. I remember having this really awkward conversation where I was like, yeah, I don't want to do it anymore. But it wasn't really me speaking, because I did want to do it. But I was like, well, I don't want to do it. It was just creepy and weird. And so I gave that up, and I pushed away everyone who had been my friend in that jiu-jitsu community. Luckily, like when I came back and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of joined a sort of cult. And they were like, yeah, like that was weird, right? And sort of rebuild a lot of those friendships. But yeah, at the time I was seeing people. I mean, one of my friends who was there had been a Levian Satanist, not because he actually believes in Satanism, but I think just, again, part of sort of a kind of secular activism or something. Again, I think a lot of people do this more commonly in America maybe than in the UK, is my understanding. And I was like, really unhappy with him, because I was like, you don't know what it means, what Satanism means, who you're really worshipping and all that. I was probably a bit of a dick to him. And I remember even once it was like, well, shall we go and grab a coffee? And I was like, yeah, but we are going to talk about religion. We're going to figure this out or whatever. And he was like, no, I just don't want to talk about religion. I just want to check you're okay. So yeah, that sort of stuff. And then in terms of, so I'd been in a relationship with someone before coming into Christianity as well. And that was my first sort of serious relationship, but there was a real pressure on me to propose and get married when we weren't ready as well. So I was really pushed into proposing and buying a house. And that was way too soon, and only bad things happened as a result of that. So that was another thing, I guess, about personal relationships and stuff. And then I can't think what else, because I was spending most of my time doing evangelism. I was actually pretty burnt out because, it's like working full time and everything. And then on the weekends, it'd be, well, we're going to this place. And the ministry trainee was really, really controlling about even really minute details, like the way that you would put up a gazebo, for example, and that we had to spend 1 hour exactly praying and reading the Bible before we'd go out and do evangelism. And we'd say, well, can't we just turn up and do it? It doesn't really matter, right? And then he'd be, no, you're doing the one, and if you're going to be late, then don't do it at all. And it's just really weird behavior and controlling behavior. And so I was quite burnt out from working full time and then like doing 6 hours of evangelism, and then it's like, oh, and see you at church tomorrow. Whatever. And I just wanted some sort of relaxation from this stuff. I find it, it's interesting and nice to read the Bible, but I don't want to be forced and compelled to do all this other stuff. So yeah, there wasn't much time at that point for relationships really outside of those and even those ones that I was forming in the church weren't the organic ones with the people I wanted to be friends within the church, because it was kind of manipulated so much by this one guy.
Yeah, that sounds like that would score rather high on the bite model. Yeah. All right. So, what is it that got you sort of out of this? Or was it like a sudden thing, or was it just sort of gradual over time? Or
I think it was over about a 4-month, well, maybe like I'd say maybe 2 months where I came to realize it, and there were about 3 different moving parts, I think, in this. One of which was because I think something really important to conversion or deconversion is motivation. So if there's absolutely no desire to leave, say if you're getting $100,000 a year teaching Bible studies in a seminary, and you've got a beautiful, there's just no desire to leave. And similarly, if your life's going great, there's no desire to deconvert. You just don't need it. Your life's fine with that. and so I think that this is the step that sort of changed my desire toward the whole thing. And it was that same manipulative guy. I was kind of apprehensive about. I'd bought a house with my ex at the time, and we hadn't got married yet, but we were engaged, and we'd been engaged for about 6 months. And I kept saying, look, I don't think it's right. I think we're unequally yoked. I'm not going to move in with her because I didn't think it was right for us to get married. I wasn't ready for that level of commitment yet, but I was ready to have a girlfriend, but not to like settle down and have kids at 21.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so he kind of, I'd also been getting into philosophy at the time, and I was thinking about going and doing, after I finished, I was doing a degree apprenticeship, so studying a degree full time while working. And I was like, well, I'll go and do philosophy after this. And as I was making my plans and getting excited and reading and stuff, I think he felt quite threatened by that. And he put a wedge in between me and her, started talking to her in one-to-one. She got this idea that now philosophy was an idol in my life that needed to be removed. And I needed to settle down and have kids right now and give up philosophy. And I remember he sort of put this idea into her head, and then we were having these conversations and things. And I probably wasn't a great partner at the time either, because I was like, well, I'm not ready to get married and move in, but I want to be with you. And we couldn't negotiate that territory because there wasn't like a healthy space to do it because of the church community and stuff. And so, yeah, I wanted to talk to her in private, and he was like, no, we're doing this now. I'm going to come with you and we'll talk about it. And I was like, well, I'm not comfortable with that. And he was like, well, it needs to happen. We did it, and we sat down somewhere, and he prayed beforehand. Oh, thank you, Father God. And if we have false idols in our hearts, I pray that you'll help us to find them in this conversation, which was clearly targeted at me and the outcome that he wanted from the conversation. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be bullied into like marrying someone because of the implications of that when I'm not sure if it's right. And so we ended up splitting up after that conversation, and I felt like he was really quite responsible for this, and I was quite upset about the whole thing. And I think that was a key to changing my desire. I was like, this guy is absolutely toxic and controlling, and there aren't the mechanisms in the church either to push back on what he's doing, because within their theology, they're just going to say everything he's saying and doing is scriptural, because that's how they've systematized the Bible. And there's a lot of different ways people can systematize the Bible, but the one that they've happened to go with, they can't push back against. There's no pushback against how he was behaving and what he was doing. And so I guess I started to distance myself from it in one aspect then. And then over the course of a couple of months, me and my ex we got back together, then split up, got back together, split up. And it just became really toxic with the arguments and things. And something happened where I was like, well, we're definitely split up now. And so the week after that, I thought, well, to move on, I've got to go and sleep with someone else. And so when I went and slept with someone else, and it was like, in my head, I had this idea of spiritual warfare, like, oh, it's Satan deceiving me, but I'm going to see what. And then it turned out that person was a human and not just like this weird sort of given over to the flesh person. That caused a lot of cognitive dissonance for me, I guess. And then the third thing was I had a conversation with a guy called Doug from Pine Creek, and he sort of asked me intellectual questions about the justification for the kind of beliefs that I had. And I saw that I didn't have a whole lot of justification versus someone from a different religious tradition. It seemed kind of arbitrary that I'd picked Christianity on the basis of the inner testimony of the Holy Spirit, whereas I'd kind of reject someone who was a Mormon on the basis of burning in the bosom or something. And these sort of things chipped away, I suppose, at some of the justification intellectually for holding the beliefs, and then the desires had changed because of the toxic way I'd been treated. And so all those strands kind of came together to me just being like, I want to get away from this thing now, actually.
Yeah, that sounds like that sounds I mean, we've had a number of deconversion stories, but it sounds like, this really sounds a lot more like a cult than just sort of run-of-the-mill Christianity. And I don't know the woman that you were purportedly to wed. Whether or not, do you know, just out of curiosity, do you know is she still participating?
Well, the interesting thing is that because we moved locations, so she wasn't going to that same church anymore because of the new house, which I sort of took my part out of, so that all belongs to her now, and she lives there unless she's moved somewhere. But she cut off all communication with me, and I don't know if this is because of recommendation in the church or because she's so angry at me or what, but there's no space for having a sort of adult conversation about these things. Like, let's have some and this has been quite difficult for me as well, because I've not been able to get any closure on that relationship. I've sort of wanted to be able to say, well, it's unfortunate what happened, but let's talk about it now as adults and wish each other the best and move on. But that conversation just isn't there to be had. I don't know if, from her point of view, she wants to like torture me or something, there's so many things it could be. I think she made quite good friends with a girl at that new church, and so I suppose that she's probably still a part of it and enjoying going and stuff like that. And I think some of those high control aspects particularly came from this ministry trainee, even though the church, the Calvinism is pretty weird and extreme and fundamentalist, but in general, I think most people were able to lead quite sort of independent lives, and have, like disagreement of opinion and stuff like that. I think it was this one guy in particular when he came for a year and a half, 2 years. And I think he was particularly just had to manipulate and control people. And I saw that in a lot of situations. And not just, like the same kind of things that were happening to me. I think other people were making complaints as well. And this is one of those things where, again, it's like there's not that built-in mechanism for the person who should be accountable there to turn around and say, what the hell are you doing? This is wrong. And also, you're definitely not appropriate for ministry, whereas he's now, studying a theology degree and he'll get his own church someday.
So once it sounds like you started to realize that this was not a tenable belief system and this was not a tenable situation to stay in this. So where'd you go from there?
Yeah, from there, let me think. I think the first thing, I actually felt physically sick for about 3 days after my Pine Creek conversation, because it was sort of like, almost like a deer caught in headlights kind of thing. Like, oh shit, like, is all of this wrong? So then I think as I felt sick, I just kind of lay in bed and I listened to almost every single Pine Creek episode ever. And that definitely was a very different perspective to the one I'd heard before. I wasn't able to laugh along with the jokes and things, but it was weird to hear people kind of laugh at some of the beliefs. I think that was quite powerful, but also question some of the inconsistencies, but not in an ignorant way. I think some atheists can be really uninformed as to what Christians actually believe. So you see this a lot from Christian apologists, where they want to identify what atheists believe as Sky Daddy straw. And there are there's a subset of atheists who do think that's what Christianity is. But when you make that what they believe, it just becomes really easy to say, well, they're idiots and they don't know what they're talking about. But when there are atheists who actually do understand, Christian theology, textual criticism, the history, philosophy of religion, they start pointing out some of these inconsistencies and the problems, and you start actually cognitively thinking about it from that different point of view. I think that it just sort of facilitated a perspective shift for me. I think some people sort of call it, or as far as the Bible is concerned, it's like a hermeneutic spiral where, you're layering your interpretation on the text as you come to read it. But I can never read it in the same way again, in light of some new kind of fact or something, in light of some new, it's always going to be, well, this is in contradiction with this gospel. Oh, well, this parable is a different ordering from this other parable, or this is clearly copying from this bit of the Old Testament, or, and that there's always going to be that as you come to read that thing. And because my Christianity had been, well, what the Bible is this, infallible, inspired set of propositions for how to live from God, just simply for you, like that. I just didn't have the tools to deal with all of that. So I was like, well, that's clearly just sort of, that's just clearly wrong. I guess I started backing out of church activities and things. I think I was still, I mean, I was still playing the bass in the church band. And I remember one time just not taking communion. And then I was like, I'm going to pull out of the church band. And I stopped my one-to-ones with this really toxic guy and stuff like that. What else kind of happened? I guess I got really into street epistemology for a while. So I watched a lot of street epistemology interviews and videos. And I found it really interesting. Now I'd had this perspective shift, how demonized it was by apologists as well. So I found there's one talk with, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Peter Boghossian. I think the method's pretty good, but I think his original book is a little bit strange, The Manual for Creating Atheists. But a conversation with him and Tim McGrew, and Tim McGrew's a Christian apologist. And again, he just came across as so just insecure and strange about the whole thing. Like he couldn't have a normal conversation about this methodology. And then what were the, and Capturing Christianity with Cameron Bertuzzi. He was constantly at that time putting out all these blog posts with philosophers about how stupid street epistemology is. I think he sent a message to Doug Pine Creek saying, before you interview people with street epistemology, you should say this disclaimer, warning, I am using this in order to... It was just really weird. It's like, why are you talking to a person in this way? Why not just talk to them yourself? What are you scared of? So I was interested in that stuff. I don't think I immediately jumped into like atheist philosophy of religion or naturalism. I think that came a little bit later, but I was certainly... still interested in philosophy for its own sake, sort of thing. And I think for a while, I was just a bit angry, feeling lied to, feeling hurt by some of the beliefs that I'd had. And it was also, it was just finding out about how Christianity had hurt people in various ways, having conversations with people who had deconverted and finding out the negative sort of the elements of control or the different kinds of theologies and how they'd manifested in like toxic relationships and things, which were really common themes that would come up again and again. And then I think a little bit later I was sort of working out, well, like how does philosophy play into this now? Like what do I actually believe? Am I agnostic? Am I an atheist? What does philosophy of religion have to actually say about all of this? And I think I sort of landed on agnosticism that was sort of really sympathetic towards atheism, but I didn't have really high credences. And then I think when my friendship started with James and we started doing bad apologetics and stuff, and he certainly exposed me more to the naturalist kind of philosophy of religion and what philosophers who go in that direction, like a naturalized metaphysics and stuff, what they'd have to say about things. I think that increased my credence further in favor of an atheism. But I never quite fully identified as an atheist. I was always, I'm agnostic because I can see that I could philosophically defend some versions of theism in some sense. So my credence towards no gods existing isn't quite high enough, I think, for me to identify in that camp. But I guess that's the broad journey. I started making friends again with people, started to humanize people in other groups, changed my views on political issues, started to sort of see Jordan Peterson as a pseudo-intellectual, and especially as I was learning more and more philosophy, and I'd see the way he'd equivocate on words and jump between topics and how incoherent that could be. And then I'd say I became quite a harsh critic of religion, for which I still am, of apologetics, but then now more sort of sympathetic towards, like that Christian atheism type Christianity, or I'm not that bothered about the metaphysics, but what are the good parts of it that can be beneficial for my life? I think is where I'm at now. So yeah.
Well, so if this filled a need that you had, and that is now moved on, and you've obviously done enough self-reflection that you can tell that was at least a major component in it, what, if anything else, has filled that need?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a continual thing, sort of, at least for me, as I can't speak for everyone's psychology, but at least for me, as long as I'm alive, I'm going to be constantly processing, what am I doing? What are my goals? Why are they valuable? What is my place in the world? What is my historical narrative about who I am and why I'm here? And I mean, that's changed in a bunch of ways. Over the past year, and I imagine it'll continue to change. But there's still, there still is a need for community and stuff like that. Some of it is filled through like friendships I have through jiu-jitsu and stuff. Some of it's filled through doing counter apologetics, like the friendships that I have through that, and the talking to people through YouTube and things. I guess I've got my own goals in terms of academic stuff and where I'm going with all that. That fills this sort of where am I going, or what do I want my life to be. I've got a good relationship now. I think though that for me there's an extra aspect, and it's the sort of aesthetic there's no other way to talk about it other than religious, really. And it's sort of, this sort of idea of special spaces and special time that's set apart for that community aspect and stuff like that. And I think that religion does still have that kind of role for me. And I'm okay with saying, well, that could purely be a product of my psychology, right? As that could purely be a product of me needing this through social psychology, whatever, and being wary of, choosing carefully what kind of environments I'm prepared to do that in, making sure that it's with people who are kind of like-minded, or at least really tolerant, even if they do have different opinions and stuff. But I still think that religion does play a role for me in all of that as well.
All right. Well, so as we start to wrap this up, if anybody had any questions in the live chat that they wanted to ask, please don't hesitate to do that. Maudie has joined us, and a few others in the live chat. So thank you all for joining. And by the way, if you've gotten this far, hopefully that means you've been enjoying the show. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. It helps us with the analytics, which is the closest thing to a god I have, I suppose. Is YouTube analytics. Joy. I can't believe I have to worry about things like that. But
it's really sort of chancy with the algorithm as well, because I think over time you just accumulate sort of numbers, and there's that thing that just happens over time. But that it's almost, it really is luck of the draw as to whether a big YouTuber has just touched on the exact same topic or something, and you get kind of caught up in that promotion or whatever. I don't think there's a real way to game it other than consistency.
There's a saying in publishing, your first book is luck, your second book is skill. And right. It's been my experience that without luck, no amount of skill is going to help. And I think when it comes to YouTube, I think luck really is going to help. And we've all seen like really bad books. They just happen to have good luck, right, and the quality didn't matter. But then when the books failed and nobody liked them, it's like, okay, you're done. You're not going to publish anything ever again. But having said that, I think there are things that you can do to maximize your chances. I think there is sort of trying to be prepared and have good methodologies and good best practices going forward, I think helps. But alone, it's not going to overcome bad luck, and it's not going to overcome, sometimes it's the luck of the draw. But I think I think luck plays into it more than one might like. So at any rate, it is a great way to support the show. You can also become a patron. Link to the patron page is down on the bottom. Thank you very much to our patrons who helped make this show possible, and we will be doing our patron hangout this Monday. We had to knock it back a week because of the American holiday. So going forward, what is it that you're untethered from this religion, and you're untethered from these rules that gave you comfort. You're now producing content that has to do with mostly religion, but I saw what was one of the I had seen, actually. I want to get back to it. One skepticism. Philosophical, Christian atheism. I can't remember the one that I saw that actually really seemed to have nothing to do with any of these. I can't remember.
Spike computational neuroscience, maybe, or I've had Gilbert Strang on to talk about linear algebra, which was.
I did want to ask you this. So one of the things I did like was your explaining key philosophical arguments, and
I kind of abandoned that one a while ago, though. But yeah,
I noticed that's what I was going to ask you about. So it was Aquinas' 5 ways, so the Quince Vitae, and which is, I think, really worth, because almost every argument that you see now, people sit there and they think it's a new argument. It's like, no, Aquinas covered this. He really did. Yet you haven't changed it. I'm sorry, the fact we have iPhones doesn't make the argument any different or stronger. But and then ontological arguments for God. So those are 2 arguments there. And yeah, I noticed the last one was, I think, 2 years ago. So yeah, January.
Yeah.
And I was so.
I should think about. I should think about coming back to them. I've thought about doing general sort of series on, because I've had some questions about, like, to do with the Bad Apologetic series, where we've been talking about things like event and agent causation, for example, in metaphysics, and people are interested in, well, what are these things? What are the arguments for and against them? And I've been thinking maybe I should do more series looking at these individual concepts, just put some slides together. And I mean, it doesn't have to be really well produced or anything, but a bit more formal in that sense. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do with the history of logic series. So starting with Aristotle, the idea was to sort of trace it all the way up through to sort of modern logic, where you've got people like Walter Pitts doing like modeling the way that the brain works in terms of like logic systems, people like von Neumann looking at that and coming up with modern computer architecture based on that, which it all kind of has its roots back to, like, so the idea is that there's a long lineage of ideas, and if you're a software engineer or something, like, which is actually what I do as a job, you're probably going to learn about some form of logic, but then there's always going to be random words in there which sort of a throwback from medieval scholasticism or something weird. And the hope of that series is to draw all of that stuff together. But yeah, I should definitely do the same with more philosophy of religion, epistemology in general. I think some basic maths as well, like set theory, probability, statistics, because that comes up not just, I mean, it's really useful for philosophical arguments, but not everyone is that interested in using these tools for philosophical arguments as well. I think it can be useful for people who are engineers or whatever. Yeah. So.
All right, so we got two questions I want to hit, and then we'll retire to the Discord. I don't know if you're free and maybe have a little time. I'd forgotten I wanted to ask you if you want to, after the show, hop into our VC, and if anybody wants to ask you any questions. So we'll drop the link. Perfect, thank you. So we'll drop the link there, and we'll both be in the lobby VC shortly after the show. So, but the 2 questions. First, was there a specific question that you felt that really shook your faith? Was there something that challenged you?
I think I can think of a few. One of them that caused me, this wasn't one that caused me to leave, but I remember it sort of lingering for a while, and it was in a Bible study that I did with someone, and I guess I sort of told them the gospel message that if you believe in Jesus, then you're saved. So the highest good, as it were, is to believe in Jesus then on that view, because that's the thing that's gonna save you eternally. It's it's the most rational thing to do, all that. And he asked me a question that sort of drew a wedge between my conception of what the good is and what Christianity was identifying as the best possible thing to do. And the way he did that was by sort of asking this question of, well, if we could lobotomize people, and it would make them have the belief that Jesus is God and died for your sins, then would that be a good thing to do? And I was like, well, it sort of would, but it, obviously wouldn't, because it just wouldn't. It's
Yeah.
not good to just lobotomize people, but it would, because Christianity, and I was stuck there. I think there was a similar question as well that I saw in a debate between Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic, and Jonathan McClatchy, where he said, if God commanded you to shoot up a primary school, for example, which is another one of those situations where it's like, well, it's good because that's how I'm defining good, right? I'm saying atheists don't have the standard, but it's also bad because so that was really difficult. And I think a bunch of Doug's questions are really good for drawing out this same contradiction. So he asks, poof or drown. So he says, if you take a sort of infallibilist, inerrant, inspired view of the Bible, you're going to believe that the Trinitarian God, so Jesus being a person of the Trinitarian God, caused a flood either locally or globally that killed women and children. And so the question that he asks is, if you're with Yahweh and he says, I'm going to give you the decision, and you can either poof them out of existence, so they'll just pop out of existence, or you can flood them and drown them, and they're going to be gasping for air, desperately trying, and then they'll drown to death. Which one would you go with? So again, it's that driving of a wedge between what is just obviously the good thing to do in that situation, that I don't think there's anything more obvious than like 1 + 1 = 2, and then what Christianity is trying to tell you is the good thing to do in that situation, and I couldn't see a way of resolving that really, to my satisfaction. Yeah, so those are the questions that really sort of got to me.
Yeah, those I haven't heard those before. The divine command theory question, though, is a common. Yeah, that's a good. that upsets a lot of atheists. All right, so and then I'll try. We got one more good one, so let's. I want to start to wrap it up. So let's see if we can get in the other two. So, Titan really swinging for the bleachers with this one. Looking back on Calvinism now, how do you feel about compatibilism? In other words, has free will won out, or has determinism? And do you feel that? Do you have any insight into the cognitive dissonance sophistry inherent in? And he didn't finish that, but my suspicion is going to be in trying to reconcile the two of those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these are really difficult questions, and there aren't any knockdown. I mean, there rarely ever is like a knockdown argument in favor of any of them. I tend to. Well, I suppose to paint a bit of the terrain to begin with. So in terms of free will, what we're talking about is, like when I seem to do something, so say, I choose to waggle my finger or whatever, that it appears that I'm making a decision. And then the question is, what's the nature of that decision? So is it truly a volition of the will? I'm just the first cause of my decision to do that. And I could, if I could have chosen something else, and it's not determined by anything prior to it or anything like that. That might be one way of going with it, generally like a libertarian account of free will, that's called. Then there are other ways of looking at that. So some people might say, well, every event, in the physical universe is causally determined. So actually there's some prior brain state, for example, that precedes even my awareness of the decision to waggle my finger, and that's what determines what happens. There's no the idea that I willed something is just a kind of illusion. That there's various other positions as well, but broadly, then you've got what's called like an incompatibilist position. So someone who's an incompatibilist thinks that the notion of free will is not compatible with causal determinism. Someone who's a compatibilist, though, sort of thinks that when we talk about freedom of the will, we're not talking about it. Well, it is compatible with causal determinism. We're not talking about it in this sense of, am I the first cause of the act happening? They're going to say, well, did I act in accordance with my desires, such that if I desired to do something else, then I could have done something else? And so actually I am free, because that's just what free means. Free just means I'm unfettered to do the thing that I desire to do. I wouldn't be free maybe if someone held a gun to my head, or someone tied me up or something. Then I wouldn't be free because I desired to do something else, and I sort of rationally couldn't because they'd shoot me, or physically constrained. And so in terms of why this is an issue for certain models of God. Well, Calvinists believe that everything that happens in the world happens according to God's will, God's decrees. And now there's all sorts of, like whether the logical ordering precedes the, like when did God do his decrees versus superlapsarianism. That's all. Let's all put all that to one side. There's different ways that people resolve this. The main idea is that if God sort of wills that something is going to happen, then it can't fail that thing comes to happen. So God foreknows absolutely everything that's going to happen in time, and it can't fail to happen. So I can't fail to do what God has willed me to do. So then the question is, in what sense can I be said to be free if I'm sort of almost this sort of automaton that's just acting according to God's will? Maybe my desires would be otherwise. Now, I think there's ways that people sort of can resolve this, but I think it broadly it's going to be incompatible with that libertarian notion of will, the idea that I'm truly the first cause of my action to do something, because it's actually God's decree that's going to be the first cause pretty much all the time. I think people could be compatibilists where they could say, but then the problem is that this is going to paint a sort of, as my friend Camille calls it, a Lovecraftian horror story of the Calvinist God who's preordained some people to salvation and some people not to. And the idea is that those people who he has preordained to salvation, so they have, because of God's foreknowledge, because of what he willed before the foundations of the earth, they desire to believe in him. So they become Christians, right? And they form the right beliefs about Jesus. And then they're saved on account of that. So they're not free in the libertarian sense, but they might be free in the compatibilist sense that they're doing what they desired to do. And had they not desired to be Christians and follow God, then they wouldn't believe in God, but they do desire it because of God's will, and so they do what they desire. The horrible sort of corollary of that is that all the people who don't believe have been willed by God as vessels of wrath from before the foundation of the earth, just for destruction. God willed that they wouldn't have the right desires. They don't have the right desires, so they're still free in the compatibilist use of the word, but they're acting in accordance with their desires to not believe in God, and so they're going to go to hell. And actually, some of these Calvinists will say, and this is what glorifies God most. This is everything that happens to glorify God most. This is John Piper's book, Desiring God on Christian Hedonism, and part of that glorification is people being burnt in hell forever and ever as vessels of wrath.
Yeah,
I don't know if that fully answered so I don't know that there's a sophistry in holding both positions. I think it can be done, but how my position's changed on it, I think I'm probably lean more towards compatibilism. I can't make any sense of a libertarian account of free will with like physics and stuff like that. I just don't know what it would mean for me to be the first cause of my decision to act in a kind of way that interacts with the world somehow, but isn't determined by anything prior to it. I can't see how that would happen at all. But there are other notions of freedom, like David Bentley Hart has one that's to do with, I mean, maybe it's not worth getting into, but it's basically to do with like the kind of reasons you have. And the idea is that the more kind of reasons that you're aware of, the actual decision that it's rational to make becomes smaller. So the scope of the decisions you make is like more limited, but you're actually freer because you're aware of more of the reasons. And he sort of ties this into normativity and moral philosophy. So he says, the being truly free is sort of conceiving of the good and acting in accordance with that, and that's to do with being aware of the relevant facts and so forth. I think I kind of am exploring that, but I think I'd fall into a sort of compatibilist camp probably broadly myself.
So you had mentioned earlier that and then we'll have this be the last question. We'll wrap up because I definitely want to have time for the Discord. So, but you had said that you basically landed on a form of agnosticism leaning towards atheism. So now, have you taken a look at Eastern religions at all, or how has that influenced where you are now? Is that something you find appealing, and is that a direction you're headed in?
Yeah. Not in anything like the depth that I've looked into Christianity in. I mean, I'm aware of the primary texts of some of the religions. I've I've read the Bhagavad Gita before. I've listened to some of the Hindu Vedas while high on weed. That's not that I don't know that is the best way of doing it, as it were. But there's, but that was like years ago, and I have been learning more. So recently through engaging with Muslim apologists, and I suppose this might not be as far east as people mean, but because it's, maybe not even as far east as Christianity, but the kind of stories behind Islam and what they take to be the miracle of the Quran and how that came about, and the textual criticism behind that of concentric ring patterns, which there's no other explanation for other than it being divinely inspired, they would say. I've looked into some of that stuff more recently, which obviously I've not come to the same conclusions as them about that. But I'm interested in the philosophy, because there's been some really, really interesting Islamic philosophers throughout the ages. In terms of Buddhism, I've been reading a book about the story of the Buddha by Karen Armstrong, who's a philosopher of religion, but some people say that's not a very good book because they'd rather me read a different one, which I'm happy to do at some other point. So I'm interested, but I'm just not as interested. I guess my view on religion is more broadly influenced by a psychological interpretation of what's going on, though I am interested in potential philosophical accounts behind it. And so, but given that more sort of psychological interpretation, I think for me, the benefit is going to be in the symbolism and how that appeals to my psychology. And just as a completely contingent fact, I could have been born elsewhere and different symbols would mean different things to me. But it happens to be the kind of language of Christianity, which has also influenced the language that I speak, English, so much, and has been a part of sort of my psychology, and thinking about death from the earliest times throughout my life. While you look at like a Christian graveyard, so it's all a part of my sort of psychological makeup. And so those symbols, even the idea of Jesus dying in the resurrection and Easter, is loosely a part of the calendar, I suppose. So those symbols speak to me more than I think the Eastern symbols ever could, unless I sort of were to redo my life. Maybe I get really, really interested through studying them and decide that that's something I want to do. But I'm interested, but it just doesn't have the same kind of appeal to me as Christianity does, basically.
All right. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you will come back. We will be headed into the Discord in just a few minutes, so we'll get that link out one more time, and then we'll be in the voice chat there in a few minutes. Again, if you've gotten this far, please hit the like and subscribe button. It really does help us out a lot, and makes doing content like this a lot easier. So thank you all for joining us. Nathan, it was nice to find. I actually did do one of your hangs. I came in a little towards the end of one of your open ones. I hope to do more of those, but nice to meet you now, sort of in a bit of a more formal setting. And thank you all for joining us. Tonight at 8 p.m. we will have on Floyd FP to discuss the Daniel's prophecy of 70 weeks in the Old Testament and its warrant for Christianity. Good night, all.